Something that struck me from something Toby was saying there is this kind of distinction between journalism place and journalist place. Is that you were talking about what can journalists do that isn't journalism, largely, or isn't journalism as is conventionally understood. So, what are the transferable skills? Whereas, understandably, the big news orgs are focused on how can we turn journalism, as it's been practiced, into extract cash from. And those are just two different emphases.
And the difficulty is that it was happening before the recession. The recession has accelerated a lot of the problems. Is that the disruption in the package that supported journalism? And I think one of the challenges about these paid content arguments is that they're dishonest, and that if journalists actually knew the business model, paid content has never been the bulk of our revenue. It just never has. It's been classified advertising and a whole bunch of ancillary stuff, but it never really paid the bills.
I was just thinking about the kind of the recurrence of the paywall. I'm not surprised about even the New York Times, considering it seeing this last time I spoke to them, they were so anti it. But the Wall Street Journal do it as well. You know, this kind of niche products. What's kind of really interesting if you look at the modern day paywall, it's very different from the olden day paywall, in that actually you can still get the content for free anyway, because everyone's now so reliable on Google. So Google has to be able to index that content for you to find it. So Google doesn't pay to get through the paywall. So any reader who sees the content can click on cached and get the free version anyway, which is perfectly true for the Wall Street Journal. I don't even know how nowadays you could be wrecked of paywall around your site without cutting yourself off from the internet.
Well, this
The
is
FT does it.
Yeah,
to a degree.
the FT does it to a degree, but the FT is actually I think it's porous. But the interesting thing about the FT is that it's quite a nuanced pastry too. So you know it's it gives you what now 30 articles a month for free.
WSJ, something.
Yeah, it's great.
2 points about that. I mean, the difficulty about if you charge for a page is how on earth are you going to get comments on it, for instance. FT provides a lot of very useful articles, particularly in the area of energy, which I look at, but I think it's 10 a month you get for free. So it's very difficult to think how you can build up some of the comments, which can be very, very useful.
The comments.
Yeah, the comments if it's behind a paywall. So the other quick point I wanted to make was that the newspapers which do actually, ironically, get most of the content is what you pay for, are the Sun and the other gutter press. They don't take much advertising, they historically haven't, and most of the cover price is what goes into the thing, but they sell 3-4 million copies a day. So there's an irony. So if you were to get more content, maybe it would drive down the quality. I hate that thought, but it's like throw it out.
Yeah, it's a tough argument.
Just, I don't know much about the industry, so I've got ideas that come from maybe what I'd like to use on the web, and then figure out ways that how can you attract money to that. So one is that you create communities of interest around content, which in some cases requires you to actually aggregate content by topic. So you're actually aggregating across all different news sources. But once you've created something that's fairly niche, you then get the long tail where you've got a small community around each niche filtered set of content. And then you've got advertisers or companies that want to market to those small niche areas. So then they'd be quite willing to pay money at that point to get to what looks to them to be a good prospect. Well, I don't know if that matches on to anything you've seen.
Yeah, no, there's a lot around that, and that's why you're seeing these kind of vertical advertising organizations to kind of focus on those niches and help bring premium ads to them. Because the strange thing is that the content that's relevant to a small group sometimes is easier to monetize than generalized content. And that's kind of one of the ironies of it. I think the tricky thing about what you described and what we've seen, especially at kind of the level of national newspapers, is that the only group of people more conservative than journalists are advertisers. And so, we have enough cultural change within our own business, and then we've got to deal with the cultural change in advertising, and they're very risk averse. And so a lot of times, what seems perfectly, clear to me is a difficult sell to advertisers. So I think they're just coming around to the idea that, look, if you're Waitrose, you obviously want to advertise on a word of mouth blog. It may have not the traffic of the entire site, but 500,000 people who come there a month are absolutely obsessed with food, and they're much more likely to click through on your ads and take part in your emotions than people who are off looking at politics or sport or whatever. So, I mean, even though everybody understands the secret sauce of Google AdSense, they haven't quite, you know, carried that over to content, the niche content that you're talking about.
One of the things that interests me is all of the advertising online, as banners were so shit, has become about click-through and so on. So the brand building stuff doesn't tend to be there. And yet, branded advertising is bigger than, you don't need a transaction to happen. It's just about help. It's another place where I go from awareness to advocacy for your product. And if we do what you were saying, Rob, about we build communities. There's a place where we can come to talk about our stuff, and it's us. It's sort of the barn building scale. It's small enough that we care about each other, but big enough to get stuff done. But you can then imagine a brand wanting to be associated with that, because we, amongst ourselves, care about each other. We value each other. We're below the Dunbar number. We care about the community that exists around us.
So